Joining us right now is the chairman of the Stagwell Group and the CEO of the Harris Poll, Chairman Mark Penn. He is the former advisor to the Clintons. Mark, it's great to see you. Thanks very much. What do you make of Biden's comment? He doesn't believe the polls. And what do you see from these polls now?
Well, if he doesn't believe the polls, he is going to believe the voters come the midterms, because these numbers are terrible. I mean, in a word. To be at 49%, and I'm sorry, to be at 39% here, you know, having come down really from almost 60%, to see that the Republicans are strong in every way. They're leading in the midterm congressional vote here by 6 points. Normally, even when it's even, the Democrats tend to win this by a few points. So this is a massive turnaround here in this polling, and a heads up that the administration has to do a pivot, you know, to the center from what it's been doing. And in this press conference, he instead doubled down on all the policies that people don't like.
And Mark, that's really what strikes me. You know, you were there during President Clinton's presidency, where he saw and read the tea leaves and actually changed policy midstream for his second term. This president is just not acknowledging what the voters are telling him. They are rejecting his Build Back Better agenda, and he's still trying to push it through. We've got crises erupting everywhere across the country, and instead of talking about a fix, he's talking about jamming through a voting bill. The Harris poll found 17% of Democrats would support Hillary Clinton as nominee if Biden does not run in 2024. Have you spoken with Hillary Clinton, Mark?
No, but I would say that 17% is a very weak number. I did not sense in this poll bring back Hillary. She used to start out in these races at 30, 40, 45, 50. When the country really wanted Hillary. This says to me the country really wants to go forward, you know, not back. They're not giving any votes to Kamala Harris either. They don't really like Joe Biden for second term. So I think the Democratic Party is in chaos. And in contrast, the Republican Party is ready to consolidate around former President Trump.
Well, maybe if Hillary runs again, she'll come up with another made-for-Hollywood storyline of collusion with Trump, the way she did the first time around. Should we expect more dirty tricks from Hillary Clinton should she run?
Well, again, I'm sure she's going to look at running, but with numbers like these, I have to pour a little bit more cold water on this whole thesis. I thought she might get much stronger numbers, but it's just not what the Democratic electorate is saying. They want somebody new. They want somebody younger. They want somebody fresher. I don't see Hillary really making a comeback here, much as tantalizing it is.
And more want that person to be Republican. Biden is not the only one dropping in the polls. The Harris poll found 53% of people prefer Republicans in the congressional races right now, compared to 47% preferring Democrats. Mark, what are you expecting in the midterms come November?
Well, I think you're going to see at least a 25-seat swing towards the Republicans with numbers like these, maybe even a little bit more. These have been growing. Remember, Biden's numbers month after month here keep falling. The Republicans' numbers here keep growing. And the disconnect on the issues, I mean, Biden went out there and he said, oh, Afghanistan was fine. The economy is fine. People don't think it's fine. You know, 2/3 reject that the economy's fine, that Afghanistan was fine, you know, that immigration was fine. 70% see crime off the charts right now.
Yeah, it's a great point, Mark. Dagan, jump in here.
Mark, one of the biggest issues coming out of this White House from Biden and company is just the messaging. At every turn when facing a crisis, they lie about it. And then they lean on the same language and phrasing over and over and over again. Until even recently, President Biden talking about the pandemic of the unvaccinated. That's simply not true. Vaccinated people are contracting Omicron and spreading Omicron. He uses the phrase, the battle for the soul of America. He started using that I think even before his nomination for for the Democratic Party to run against Trump. I don't understand why they aren't, like a Clinton, more nimble at just the messaging and the way they talk about these problems.
Well, the hyperbole is certainly backfiring. The January 6th speech was negatively received by the public. I don't know. It's a mystery why they haven't pivoted. I remember Bill Clinton didn't pivot until after the midterms, but he thought he was going to win the midterms. Here, everybody knows that the political situation has turned around, and he says, and President Biden says, well, I'm going to go out and campaign. Well, which Democrats are going to want a 39% positive president campaigning in their district? Oh my God, they're going to be running away from the president during this midterms unless things dramatically turn around. Look, one of the suggestions I tested in the poll is if he really wanted to reach out, he should have pardoned all of the nonviolent people from January 6th, prosecuted only the violent ones, and that in the poll would have gotten him a huge reception for reaching out. But they are about as far removed from something like that as anyone could imagine.
Real quick, Mark, they're actually using Sarbanes-Oxley to try and elevate these charges. Sarbanes-Oxley, which was passed as a financial fraud law after Enron. That's how desperate they are.
Well, look, I think that there's a very good case here for people who are actually violent on January 6th. People would want to see them prosecuted. But for those who are not violent, were just there taking pictures, came in, American tradition would be not to prosecute them. And I think the January 6th committee, is overstepping its authority. All of these uses of the criminal justice and investigative system against political enemies are seen as backfiring, as opposed to dialing them back just to those who were violent. That would have been a much smarter move here than what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, it's a great point, all of this. Meanwhile, people are sitting in jail and in isolation as a result of everything you've just said, Mark, and it's all politics while real crime goes unnoticed. No problem with all of those protesters back in 2020, the summer of love, in where we saw businesses forced to board up. And then you've got Dr. Fauci sitting there lying under oath. No problem there. I thought that was a felony. Mark, it's good to see you. Thanks very much.